You may have seen this story in the news today because today, February 26th, as I'm recording this, this is when the embargo was released on the information. So the Pew Research Center, every several years, they do a massive survey about religion across the country. And when I say massive, I mean they interview or get participants. They get more than 35,000 people to answer their survey in various ways. And they did it in 2007 and they did it in 2014, and now they're doing it. They just released the latest numbers now. So those are three very different years where we have a ton of very granular data about religion in America. And if you ask what happened like years ago, 2007, the biggest story was that Christianity had gone from 78% of the country to 71% in 2014. And the unaffiliated numbers had gone from 16% to 23%. So big decline for Christianity, big rise for the number of unaffiliated Americans. That was between 2007 and 2014. So it makes you wonder, what are they going to find now? Because, man, the whole world has changed since 2014. And I want to share with you just a handful of results from this survey because it's a 300-page document. This is the big headline from the Pew Research Center today. Decline of Christianity in the U.S. has slowed, may have leveled off. This is their big takeaway from the data. And let me show you where they're getting that from. Okay, I got a bunch of pictures to show you. Here is the biggest version. Here's the big picture I want to show you. Check this out. I'm going to scroll in here. Share of U.S. adults identifying as Christian is down since 2007 when it was 78%. But look at that red line. And you can look at the bottom. Like on the far left, you have 2007. We have 2014 when it hit 71% for Christians. But look at what has happened in the years since. Christianity, the percentage of Americans who say they're Christian has gone down over the years. But in the past few years, it's basically leveled off. In fact, this year alone, it may have gone up a little bit to 63%. So long term, this is not great for Christianity. But in the short term, hey, we're not doing worse if you're a Christian. Now, what's happened for the religiously unaffiliated? You could see the similar pattern. We started out in 2007 with only 16% of the Americans being unaffiliated. It jumped to 23%. Look where it is now, though. 29%, with maybe a small dip this year to 28%. So the overall trend is we are going upward. That's great, but it may have plateaued. And so the question now is, are we done? Is it going to level off for good now? Or are the trends going to keep going in that direction? And we're just at a temporary reprieve right now. You know, it's kind of hard to say. And by the way, you could see there at the bottom, other religions, it's been pretty steady. So the people who are leaving Christianity are basically ditching religion altogether, which is a very interesting thing to think about. Now, the numbers actually get worse for Christians when you look beyond that particular graph right there. Let me show you a couple things here. This is interesting. Look at this chart here. It divides people up by age groups. And look at the far left here. Percentage of people who pray daily. The darkest blue lines toward the top are the oldest Americans. And you could see over time, and you can see the bottom here, it's from 2007, 2014, 2023, 2024. Over time, the oldest Americans, they used to pray a lot daily. 65% of Americans, oldest Americans, used to pray daily. They've dipped to 58%. And as you get younger and younger, people are less and less likely to pray on a daily basis. Do you see this dot at the very bottom right over here? It says 27%. That's a dot because that's the first time we have data on the people born between 2000 and 2006. They're babies. Only 27% of them pray daily. So that's not great if you're religious. What about this? What percentage of people are Christian? Among the oldest Americans, just about all of them were Christian. 86% of old people were Christian back then in 2007. Now, dipped down to 80. What about the youngest people? Oh my God. Only 46% of the babies, and by babies, I mean like 18-year-olds to like 24-year-olds, only 46% of them are Christian. How many people are religiously unaffiliated? Look at that. I know it's not a big jump up for any of these groups, but it is going up no matter the age group. And now 43% of the babies are non-religious. So even if we have plateaued, as those old people die off and the younger people take their place, you can imagine it's going to become a more secular society. Let me show you another interesting image about this is breaking it down between young people and old people. Again, young adults are far less traditionally religious than older adults. And look at this. When it comes to praying daily, the younger you get, the less likely you are to pray. I just showed you that. How many people attend religious services monthly? And it goes less and less the younger you get. The only interesting thing here is if you look at people born in the 1990s and then the people born in the 2000s, there's actually not much difference at all. So again, this is the plateau we're talking about. But what happens when the people born in the 40s die off? That decline in organized religion is still going to be felt. What percent of people believe in God with absolute certainty? The younger you are, the less likely you are to believe in God 100%. And the same thing, how many identify as Christian? Less and less as you get younger. How many are unaffiliated? More and more as you get younger. And I know those last two cohorts are basically the same, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to stay that way. So that one's interesting. I want to show you, I'm going to jump around here. Let me jump to a different topic here altogether, which is race, because they actually did this as well. Let me talk about atheism. Atheism specifically, not just the religiously unaffiliated, but atheism has typically, historically been a white guy thing, right? While various groups have pushed to make atheist events more inclusive and acceptance of atheism more inclusive, that's kind of always felt like an uphill climb. There's not a lot of brown people who are talking about atheism. Not a lot of black women talking about atheism. Definitely not a lot of us being platformed the way Richard Dawkins are or Christopher Hitchens used to be or whatnot. But the Pew survey found that there's at least some movement in this direction. Let me show you this piece of information. Look at the racial composition of Christians and the religiously unaffiliated. Among Christians, what percent are white? Christianity is becoming a little less white over the years. Interesting. A little more Hispanic, slightly more black, not much change elsewhere. But look at this. Among religiously unaffiliated Americans, not atheists, just religiously unaffiliated, we are also getting less white as a whole. We're getting much more Hispanic. There's actually a pretty big jump from like 4% to 7% for Asian, and everyone else is pretty steady. But that means as a whole, non-religious Americans are becoming less white. Now, what happens if you look at atheists specifically? When I looked up those numbers in the data, let me tell you what they found. I don't have a pretty chart for you, but what they found is that among atheists, 75% are white, 10% are Hispanic, 8% are Asian, and 2% are black. We are still pretty damn white as a community of atheists. But even that is less so than it used to be. What about gender? That's always been a thing, right? Atheism is always a male thing. And a lot of women have pushed to make those spaces more inclusive. Well, this is also very interesting. When you look at the people with no religious affiliation, just the nuns, check this out. And I broke this out just to show the nuns. The number of Americans, percentage of Americans with no religious affiliation used to be 16% in 2007. Now it's 29%. That's the percentage of Americans with no religious affiliation. Look at the percentages. It used to be that 20% of Americans were men with no religious affiliation. This is right over here. Men with no religious affiliation used to represent 20% of Americans, and women with no religious affiliation were 13% of Americans. What's happened now? Non-religious men represent 31% of the country, and non-religious women represent 27%. So the gap is actually closing among the nuns, right? That's a good thing. If you're wondering about atheists specifically, in 2007, 2% of Americans were male atheists, 1% were female atheists. Today, those numbers are 6% and 4%, respectively. And that means the gap, the relative gap between men and women is closing, which again, very interesting. I want to show you my favorite chart in this entire 300 pages. Are you ready for this? This is my absolute favorite one because you'll just want to stare at it for a while. And honestly, when I was looking at coverage of what other people wrote about this data today, I did not see this stressed, and I don't really know why. Check this out. On balance, Christians lose more people than they gain by religious switching. Okay, so they asked people, what religion were you raised in and what religion are you now? Okay, and what this is saying is I'm looking at the top line here. For every one person who joins Christianity from some other religion or no religion, 6 people leave Christianity. They are leaking. They're like a bucket of water that is leaking. For every one person who joins Christianity, 6 people leave it. And when you look at Catholics specifically, for every one person who becomes a Catholic, 8.4 people run the hell away from the Catholic Church. They are leakier than Christians in general. And then look at this line right above me here. For the religiously unaffiliated, for every one person who finds God somehow, 5.9 people decide to ditch organized religion entirely. So this is the change. This is what religious groups are up against. That, for all the talk we have about like fundamentalist Christian families like the Duggars who have these quiverful families, lots of kids, guess what? They think they're having a lot of kids in order to raise another generation with more Christians than ever before. But that's not the reality of the situation. Because the reality is, as people grow up, they're leaving organized religion and they're becoming religiously unaffiliated. I love that. People are more willing to switch religions as they grow up. And we, the nuns, NONES, are the beneficiaries of that. I absolutely love that graphic. I want to show you another thing here. This one's just straight up funny, I think. Because here's the thing, Americans as a whole, we are not a smart people. Okay, most Americans believe in God. That's not weird at all. But look at this. Like among religiously affiliated adults, adults who say, yeah, I'm religious, 96% of them believe in God. Well, okay, I expect that number to be high. Who are those other 4? Who are the 4% of religiously affiliated people who are like, I'm not sure about God? But look down here if I scroll down. Among atheists, 7% of atheists say they believe in God. Absolutely or fairly certain that God exists. 7% of atheists say they are absolutely sure God exists or fairly sure God exists. Who are you people? If you told me among religiously unaffiliated people, look at that number, 54% think, all right, I don't have an organized religious label, but I think there's something out there. I believe there's a God out there. I just don't have a name for it. I get that those people are wishy-washy, and 54% of them believe in some higher power. But among atheists, specifically, What is going on here? Who are these people who are like, yeah, I'm definitely an atheist? Oh, do you believe in God? Yeah, maybe. 7% of atheists make no sense at all. You are not doing atheism right. Not to be a gatekeeper, but no, that's not how it works. What the hell? I don't get it. Along those same lines, by the way, 5% of atheists believe in heaven, which is actually an improvement because in 2007, 12% of atheists believed in heaven. We've dropped it down to 5% who are very confused people. 4% of atheists believe in hell. And like I just showed you, 7% of atheists believe in God or some universal spirit. I don't know. In case you're wondering, 2%, I want to show you, where did it go? 2% of Christians say they are pretty damn sure God does not exist. So if it makes you feel any better, there are some very confused Christians as well. So that one's interesting. This was another tab I wanted to show you here. It turns out there's a lot of overlap between your religiosity and your political affiliation. So look at this. They asked people about high religiousness. And you could see in the fine print here, what does religiousness mean? It means how often you pray. Do you believe in God? Do you think religion is important? Do you go to a religious service? If you answered yes, then you have high religiosity. And it turns out if you're very religious, 61% of people who are very religious lean Republican or vote Republican. Meanwhile, if you are not religious at all, 67% of people are Democrats. And you can see in the top line here, it's pretty split down the middle because we are a very polarized, divided nation, almost down the middle. It's about half and half. But what amazes me about this, and I know I've said this before, Republicans go out of their way to pander to the religious. I mean, we know they pander to conservative Christians. That's what Project 2025 is all about. That's what Christian nationalism is all about. And yet, Democrats try to pander to the religious too. And it makes no sense at all because the biggest chunk of their base is non-religious. Democratic candidates, especially for statewide national office, I don't need them to be atheists. I need them to be talking about how we're going to respect church-state separation and we're not going to let one religion dictate our laws. You could win on that platform because there's a whole lot of us who don't want religion infiltrating our politics, right? A couple more things here. This is interesting. When you look at Black Americans specifically, turns out it doesn't matter how religious you are. If you're very religious, 76% vote for Democrats. If you're very not religious, 75% of Black people vote for Democrats. Democrats down the line, Black people down the line support Democrats. Doesn't matter how religious you are. I enjoyed that one. That was interesting. If you're curious about the partisan affiliation, I know this one's hard to read, but this is who's Republican and who's Democrat. And if I scroll down here to atheist, right above my little frame here, there we go. 82% of atheists vote for Democrats, support Democrats. Only 15% are Republican. You could see overall for the unaffiliated, it's 62 support Democrats. But among atheists, 82%. 82% of atheists support Democrats is higher than the number of evangelicals who vote for Republicans. We are a very tight base, strong base for Democrats. I wish they would realize it. And then one last part of this I wanted to show you is that when it comes to any moral issue, notice where atheists are at. So here's one about trans people. Do you think that acceptance of people who are transgender, do you think it's good that we accept people who are transgender? Let me scroll down to atheists. Among atheists, 76% of atheists say, yeah, it's good that we accept trans people. Only 12% say no, and that person's name is Richard Dawkins. or Jerry Coyne. Take your pick. But look at this. Among evangelicals, it's totally flipped, obviously. 64% of evangelicals want nothing to do with trans people. So on this moral issue of our time, are we better off when we accept trans people for who they are, when we see their humanity? Atheists are on the side of moral decency more so than any other group here. Let me pick another issue. This is an interesting one. Women in the workplace. Do you think it's good? Do you think it's good that we allow women to work? Among people with low religiosity, 83% say, yeah, it's good that women are able to work. Among people who are super religious, only 64% think it's a good thing. Yikes. So, on that moral issue, we're the ones on the right side of things. What about immigration? What percent of people say America's openness to people from all over the world is essential to who we are as a nation? That we ought to let in refugees and immigrants. If you have low religiosity, 82% of people who have low religion, I can't do the camera thing, can I? 82% of low religious people say it's good. 61% of high religiousness, 61% of people with high religiousness say it's good. So again, when it comes to welcoming people into our country, we're the ones with the moral high ground. Oh, this is fun. Do you think it's good that America is made up of different races and ethnicities? Turns out the less religious you are, the cooler you are with people of different colors and backgrounds. And it turns out if you're super religious, only 67% say it's okay. Jesus. Like, there's unbelievable. And what about the environment? Do you think it's good to have stricter environmental laws and regulations? Among atheists, at the very bottom here, 87% of atheists say, yeah, it's good to protect the environment and have regulations and protect the only planet, the only pale blue dot we have. Meanwhile, among evangelicals, only 44% give a damn about the earth because they don't think they're going to live here for very long. Again, name the moral issue. The less religious you are, the better person you are on every front, right? Phil Zuckerman, the sociologist, wrote this years ago, but I still quote it constantly. When it comes to the most pressing moral issues of the day, hardcore secularists exhibit much more empathy, compassion, and care for the well-being of others than the most ardently God-worshipping. And it turns out, even today, that has not changed one bit. And I do wonder if at the end of this Trump Christian nationalist regime, I wonder how many more people are going to want nothing to do with Christianity because it's so intertwined with Trumpism and the MAGA cult and all that. I mean, maybe that'll happen. I hope the next time they do this religious landscape study, we find that decline just keeps going. Maybe it's at a temporary pause for now, but I hope it continues into the future. So you should check that out. It's at Pew Research, pewresearch.com. I believe is the website. Let me double check that. But you should read, pewresearch.org, I should say. The whole study is fascinating. It's so much information. You could break it down by state. You could break it down, like they give you the tools to figure out exactly what you'd like to know. Really fascinating stuff if you like data. All right, I'll pause there. What else we got here? Church will be vigilante watching for the opportunity to create chaos and squeeze resources so people will come running back for safety. I mean, this is the thing that churches do so well, right? They create the problems and then they present themselves as the solution, right? Everything is a sin, but if you need help protecting yourself against sin, guess what? We have the answers for you in church. And if they just scare you constantly, I mean, that's what Fox News does, right? It's just constant fear and injecting you that you should be scared. There are brown people next door. There's a caravan coming. And if you watch them and vote for Republicans, they'll protect you, even though they don't do anything of the sort. So, I mean, yes, this is what churches constantly do. They scare you, and then they tell you to come back to them for safety, even though the stuff they tell you should scare you are usually things they're making up. But do people become religious as they get old? Not me. I'm a 70-plus-year-old atheist, but I'm also moving left politically. Trump and Elon are turning me into a socialist. Isn't this the old canard we used to hear? Like, as you get older, you'll become more conservative. And I feel like everyone I know has only gotten more radicalized over time, because people my age, if you're 40-ish, around that age, you grew up where the Republicans who ran the country, not even Reagan, but like George W. Bush and beyond, it's like the Republican Party has always been a source of evil. They've never done the good things in the country. So, I mean, I can imagine as you grow older and you watch what that party's becoming, sensible people are running the hell away. I have hope that the next generation will make things better. So good on you for going socialist. Maybe the poll doesn't distinguish between atheists and agnostics. Maybe that comment came up earlier on. They did distinguish between atheists and agnostics in the specific data, but a lot of times it's just easier to lump non-religious, religiously unaffiliated Americans into one category. But they do break it down for atheists and agnostics too. This is very interesting. So black people vote more for Democrats, whether Christian or not. I mean, yeah, in fact, the black church is often a hub for Democratic voters, like souls to the polls. They make it very clear in a lot of black churches that the way to live out your values is through voting. And so I get why Democratic candidates would want the support of the black church. But when they're trying to get votes from the nation at large, they got to realize that a huge chunk of their base is also non-religious. And I've heard it's amazing that even though black Americans represent a smaller percentage of the voting base for Democrats, a reliable one, but a smaller one, they do nothing to reach out to non-religious Americans as a whole. Like, they always pander to the religious, trying to imitate Republicans, and it never helps in my head. I don't need them to be anti-religious. I just need them to acknowledge, hey, there's a lot of us who just don't want religion in the government. And if you say you're going to protect that and you support church-state separation, that actually is a winning message in a lot of places.